the title of this book that is being launched today is called Silence is Not an Option, and it really is an absolute honour and privilege for me to share a platform with the woman who wrote this book, Sukhdev Rial, the mother of Ricky Rial, because as the title says, for her, silence was not an option. And ever since Ricky died, and she'll talk about the circumstances in which Ricky died in 1997, she has refused to be silenced, despite everything that has been thrown at her by the state to silence her. And this is the book that tells her story. So it is, for Bookmarks to be able to publish this book has been an enormous privilege. I've had the huge privilege of being able to read it in advance, and I could not recommend it highly enough. And it is an enormous privilege to share a platform with Sukhdev, as it is with the others who are on this platform. Mike Schwarz, a solicitor who has supported Sukhdev and her campaign. Suresh Grover, who has been since 1997 a supporter of Sukhdev's campaign and has, I think, since the 1960s been a tireless campaigner against...
Give me a decade earlier.
Okay. Suresh only started... he's a youngster. He only started in the 1970s. A lot to learn. We're going to start, however, with a message from someone who has also supported Sukhdev since the beginning, and that's her MP, John McDonnell, who is not with us but is appearing via video link. So if we can cue that up. Let's start with John's message.
Let me first of all congratulate Sukhdev for writing this book. It must have been hard. It must have been extremely distressing, reliving the loss of Ricky, her son, reliving the struggle she's had to go through over the last 2 decades in the search for the truth of what happened to Ricky, and yes, the search for justice. I knew the Rial family, they're constituents of mine. And so it was natural for them to approach me when Ricky went missing, and especially because the police were refusing to take seriously their concerns about the loss of Ricky. They approached me in the first 48 hours, and Suresh Grover, an old friend of mine who'd worked with me on a whole range of local issues within my constituency and on miscarriage of justice cases, contacted me because it was for the family. Well, it was clearly there was just something wrong that Ricky hadn't come home. It was so out of character. A loving, responsible son who always kept his parents informed of what he was doing. So it was obvious to the family that something was amiss. But what they couldn't do is get that concern across to the police in a way in which the police responded effectively, particularly within that first period when in any investigation it's critical to identify what exactly did happen and collect the evidence. At that stage, although we were given assurances by the police that they were applying resources for the investigation, in fact it was the family who undertook the search for Ricky. It was the family who collected in evidence, and actually it was the family all along who recognised the seriousness of what we were dealing with. And from the very start, the police investigation was appalling. Lack of resources, failure to investigate the link between possible racial attack and racial abuse that Ricky and his friends suffered and Ricky going missing. It was the family who highlighted to the police where Ricky's body could be in the Thames. And it was the family throughout who were pleading with the police to undertake a full investigation so we could find out the truth of what happened to Ricky. The irony was what we later discovered, that the police were applying resources, but they were applying resources to actually undertake a surveillance exercise on us who were campaigning for truth and justice in Ricky's case. As part of the Spy Cops exercise, the police then admitted that they were surveilling our campaign, and they referred to it as collateral intrusion, a concept we'd never heard before. The family were harassed just for campaigning to find out the truth about Ricky. Suresh Grover, at one point, we were worried was going to be arrested purely and simply because he was discovering evidence and putting it out in the public domain. The police tried to ensure that they kept away from us even the information about their own review of the investigation itself. And I had to use parliamentary privilege at one point to read into the record a report that had been leaked to us. That's how bad it got. The suffering the family went through is heartrending. The loss of a son, the disrespect from the police, the failure to investigate to find out the truth. And still now, we still haven't arrived at the truth about what happened to Ricky. We still haven't secured justice. But what's inspiring, and you'll find this in reading the book, is the commitment that there is from the family, Sukhdev and all the family, and all those campaigners who've been alongside the family. The commitment that one day we will find out the truth and we will secure justice for Ricky Real. So I think one of the major contributions that Sukhdev is making with the publication of her book is to ensure that others become aware of the injustice that her family faces, and we secure their support in the campaign in the coming period to secure a new investigation, and one which takes seriously the evidence that we've discovered about what happened to Ricky and the link between Ricky's loss and racism within our society. So again, thank you, Sukhdev, for writing this book. I know you've gone through pain and heartbreak in doing so, but I think it will help us secure justice for Ricky and truth overall. And you know, in this campaign for truth and justice for Ricky Real, we've inspired others, and we've given support to other campaigns and other families that are facing the same injustices, the same neglect from the justice system that we have. And I hope in inspiring them in that way, Sukhdev, you've helped them too. Solidarity. And let's continue this campaign for truth and justice for Ricky Real and for all others who the system has let down so badly. Solidarity.
That was John McDonnell, MP, and one of the other people who hasn't been able to join us on this platform, but who has always also been a supporter of Sukhdev and her family's fight for justice, is Michael Mansfield, QC. And I think Tish, one of Sukhdev's daughters, has a message from Michael that she would like to read out. So Tish, over to you.
So this message is from Michael Mansfield, who's been with our family from the very beginning, and he was the barrister who represented us throughout the inquest and fought with us to get an open verdict when the police were lobbying to get an accidental death verdict. So his words mean a great deal to our family, and I hope they mean a great deal to everyone here today. Before I start, though, he has asked me just to let you know that there is another book out which complements ours and is by Matt Foote and Morag Livingstone, and it's called Charged, and its focus is on the right to protest and attack on this government proposals. So he's asked me just to raise that with you all here today. And what follows are Mike Mansfield's words. I never met you. This is for Ricky, I should say, for Ricky Reel from Mike Mansfield. I never met you, but your memory has stayed with me from the start of work on your inquest until now. It is such an opportune moment for your mum's book to be launched. The points that she has so forcibly pursued about you over many, many years about police culture and attitudes have been dramatically laid bare in this book. You, Ricky, and your legacy are a vital part of that narrative. Believe it or not, the Met has been placed under special measures in the last few days, just a few days ago. About time, we say. First, the ex-commissioner, Cressida Dick, went out of her way to distance herself from the Lawrence inquiry findings by claiming that institutional racism was no longer an applicable or relevant concept. This was blown out of the water within minutes by the exposures from Charing Cross Police Station, a stone's throw from NSY, New Scotland Yard. On top of this came the disgusting revelations of police behaviour in the Smallman murders. The Commissioner plainly cannot have been so out of touch that she had no idea about the continuing prevalence of a subculture featuring bigotry and resistance to change. This has been allowed to flourish by the ineptitude of one of the worst Home Secretaries in living memory. She said nothing and she did nothing save to maintain faith in the Commissioner, even in the face of the Everard murder by a Met police officer. Too busy dreaming up unlawful deportation schemes. Thankfully, the Mayor of London had the courage to lance the boil, now amply justified by the police inspectorate conclusions. While representing you and your family, I was accompanied by a friend, Benjamin. He has been awarded residency by the Poetry Society and chose my chambers. He followed our work and he provided a perceptive and welcome perspective. One of the poems he wrote about what he witnessed was later published in his anthology called Too Black, Too Strong. And this poem is dedicated to you, Ricky, and I'm going to ask my niece, Ricky's niece, I should say, to come and read Benjamin's poem. She never got to meet Ricky, but yet she's inspired by his story, and she's going to read this out to you today. Thank you.
There is a great wickedness here, and it thrives on people who do nothing. It's planted deep in the souls of the serious sick, and I don't know how to say this, but things are certainly not getting better. The pacifists are out, the militants are out, and we will not be defeated. But it's hard, very hard. I keep seeing your face in myself, and every time...
Every time I see your mother, there is a constant, I love you, Ricky, in her eyes. Thank you.
I wanted to show.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Michael, for those words, and thanks to both of you for having the strength and courage to make those contributions as well. I'm going to pass over now to the baby of the struggle, Suresh Grover, who's going to provide some of the context. Suresh.
Thank you, Brian. Just want to pay my respect to Sukhdev's family. I can see a large number of people here who've obviously, and actually some people there outside the tent who are friends. It's 25 years. We can't forget decades, years, months of daily remembering and daily struggle and daily pain that the family suffers because the manner in which Ricky was killed, and more importantly, or as importantly, the manner in which the state and the police dealt with the family and has dealt with other black communities throughout their existence in this country. And in fact, much earlier, given the history of colonies that the British colonial administration and government occupied across the world. 25 years. When a couple of months ago Sukhdev discussed the publication of a book, I never thought I would actually be here in July and be part of the launch. I thought this can't happen in 3 months. I thought this book would be published in October or November because I thought the story is so immense and painful and the detail is so incredible. And in fact, I shouldn't have been surprised because Sukhdev is one of the few people I've ever met in my life who keeps her word and always does things, pushes people. I haven't had one phone call, but about 150 phone calls in the last week to make sure that I write my article. And I've been involved in many campaigns, as Sukhdev and the family know. I know, I said to Brian, that I'm not involved in 60. I was only born in 1960s or late 50s. But hey, that's not a problem because Sukhdev's book is an epic tale of a family's quest for justice in the society. Their tenacity, their fiber, their determination, not only to find him in the first week when he went missing on 14th of October 1997, but after, when he's found on the 21st of October, exactly a week later, their searching questions, their organization of protests, of pickets, of meetings, of representations, of poems after poems that Sukhdev writes. And you should read her poems. She's just not a writer, she's actually a poet. And they are poems that move you tremendously, not just because of what happened to his son, but that resonance of injustice felt throughout society by working people, by women, by black people, is depicted in those poems through a personal testimony and story, and that's what the book is about. When Sukhdev rang us on the 15th or 16th of October, I can't remember, it was a day later, and I went to her house with a colleague of mine, it was obvious to me that she loved her family, not just Ricky, but every member of the family, and that there was a single focused determination to seek the truth and justice. But rather than being treated as a human being, a mother in distress, looking for her child who had been missing, who'd been racially abused, the police put every single obstacle in her path. They belittled her. They took evidence, and I don't want to talk in front of children, but the manner in which the post-mortem was done on Ricky, I put that in my introduction. The photographs are so despicable in the manner in which they treated Ricky without any dignity after his death. And rather than spending money on trying to find out who the perpetrator was and getting to the evidence, what do? They spy on the family. Undercover officers in the Metropolitan Police belonging to the special branch spy on Justice family campaigns. Her crime seems to be her fearlessness. Her crime seems to be her determination to seek the truth. Her crime seems to be her warrior kind status that she gains because she goes to every single public meeting and raises that quest for justice. Her crime seems to be the same crime that one of your comrades and somebody, I live in Southall, Blair Peach, suffered. And that is solidarity. The crime seems to have been just wanting, not just to find truth for your own son, but linking with other families who are on the same journey as her. Spying by undercover officers, part of an inquiry. And the spy cop scandal, it's not a scandal, it's an epic tale of hundreds of years of surveillance, intrusion on protest groups. That's what the real stuff is about. So you do not challenge the status quo in this society. And Sukhdev's simple questions about her son is seen as a challenge to this dehumanized society, which is against working people, which is against women, which is misogynist and racist to its core. That's what the context is. So Sukhdev's tale in this of Ricky has to be put in a context. It's a personal journey, but it's a journey that other families and other people have suffered. Brian mentioned that I was involved in the Stephen Lawrence case. Sukhdev and I went to every single public meeting that the Lawrences organized or which we organized. We were, I think, the only few people at the first day of the public inquiry. People have forgotten. Although there was a campaign for the Lawrence family from 1993 when he was killed up to 1998 when the public inquiry was called at Elephant and Castle. But during the public inquiry, we had to relaunch the campaign. We actually went out on the streets, spoke on soapboxes, got people involved, and we created a public gallery which scrutinized the inquiry itself. So it wasn't a sterile court system where the judge could do whatever he wanted in that imperial kind of environment where people have no real say. And Sukhdev was part of that process, all the fighting for her son's questions about her death. She linked up with other families. Neville Lawrence became a personal friend who supported the campaign. And Stephen's case is simply similar to Sukhdev and Ricky Reel's quest for justice. The difference is this. In the Lawrence case, we were able, in 1993, a month after, with all the same similar police responses to the Lawrences and Sukhdev, we were able to get a world statesman to visit the Lawrence family, who met at a Piccadilly station. Nelson Mandela met Doreen and Neville and came out of the hotel and said, black lives are as cheap in this country as in South Africa. That triggered a massive national response to the Lawrence case. Okay? A national, international response to the Lawrence. We couldn't get somebody called Nelson Mandela in Sukhdev's case. You shouldn't need one. And the same team that we had, the Lawrences, began to work on the Real family. Mike Mansfield. In fact, your solicitor at one time was Sadiq Khan, who was the mayor of London now. He's a solicitor that we worked with right at the beginning. And Michael comes in later, much better than Sadiq, I can tell you, right? Sadiq had it easy because we did all the work for it. Mike is involved at this period where not just the issue of racism, but also spy cops becomes central. Sadiq is not involved in that. Sadiq did everything in his power to get to whatever. But, Sadiq has the ability to say one thing to the Met, reinvestigate. And they would have no choice but to investigate. And there should be a demand on the mayor, who happened to be Sukhdev's lawyer in 1997. I just think it's important, critically important, to recognize not just the context, but where we move forward in this case. 25 years. Sukhdev is not going to give up. This book is a landmark towards another journey. It is a book that comes at a very important, critical period in the history of campaigning, at a juncture where the Metropolitan Police has been found wanting systematically on various issues. In 1997, when Ricky was killed, it was obvious to the Met that there would be a campaign, that they would be under scrutiny, that they would be exposed. It was at a time when, for example, Straw had announced a public inquiry on Stephen's murder. It was a time when the racially aggravated offences had come. It was a time when legislation was being changed in terms of racism, etc. So it was obvious that the Met would be under scrutiny. But they did everything under their power to keep it under a lid, because they believe they are unaccountable and they are not a force that can be challenged or tackled effectively and properly. And 25, 30 years of experience tells us that we have to start looking as families and as communities and as activists and as socialists beyond the issues of accountability. We can't just keep on talking about accountability at all. These are important, critical issues for us to address. Police powers that exist are shockingly authoritarian at this moment. The right of our protests, the protests that we went to, organized in 1907, will not be possible in the next 2-3 years if you do not challenge that. If you got to win, justice is very difficult in this society. Very difficult. Some of people that I know around communities don't even know what justice tastes like. I don't know what it feels like. And that's because the system is pitted against us. And we have to begin to ask those important questions of supporting campaigns, building movements, developing causes that not just expose the severity and the pain that Sukhdev has gone to, but also reshape a different vision for our society. So, Ricky, real doesn't happen. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for those words, Suresh. And just before I move on, I think you're right to talking about what does justice really look like, and for families like Sukhdev's and for Stephen's family, of course, they'll never get real justice because Stephen and Ricky will never be able to lead. They won't be brought back and they won't be able to lead the lives that they should have led. So of course there'll never be real justice in this sense. But we should not underestimate the enormity of what these families and the struggle that they have waged has achieved for the rest of us, because the talk of institutional racism and the wider talk we now hear about institutional corruption, institutional sexism in the wake of what happened to Sarah Everard, that narrative and that understanding is precisely because of the Stephen Lawrence campaign, isn't it? And the campaign that Sukhdev and others have fought. And it matters and makes a difference. But of course, it isn't enough. And the fact that we have, and it came into force this week, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, which will prohibit the right to protest and so on, is the way in which the state continues to fight back and to try and crush us down. And therefore, it is vitally important that we continue to talk about how we organise and mobilise and continue to fight and campaign. On that note, let me pass, I don't need to pass the mic, you have a mic, to someone who, one of the bad things about the pandemic is not seeing people for so long, is that after you see them for the first time in years and you don't recognise them. And so when I saw Mike outside, it was as if it was someone who I hadn't ever seen before. Mike I do know as a brilliant campaigning lawyer who's been not just a supporter of the Real Family campaign, but has been involved in fighting for the Spy Cops inquiry and the exposure of the scandal that is Spy Cops. So, Mike, over to you for 5 minutes or so to talk about that and anything else that you want to throw out for us to discuss. Mike Schwarz.
Hello. Hello everyone, thank you for having me. I feel a bit sandwiched because really what you want to hear from is, you want to hear from Sukhdev, and so we'll keep it short. And I'm preceded by some fantastic speakers. Suresh, who's been a stalwart campaigner for the family and for others. And you've heard from John, and you've heard from Mike Mansfield and Brian. And I'd just like to echo that this isn't just about Sukhdev, though it's a fantastic book, but it's about her whole family and campaign and supporters and friends who are here and have been very patient listening again to what the family have been through. But it's just such an important event, account. I won't say story because that minimises the importance of it. I was going to give you a trail for chapter 6, which is about undercover policing, and I'll just make 5 points, and then we can hear from the main turn. As you know, there is an undercover policing inquiry run by a former judge called Mitting. It's been going since 2015, and at the time it was set up, it was due to report in 3 years' time, 3 years from 2015, and we haven't even reached the foothills of the inquiry. But Sukhdev and the family are core participants in that inquiry, and it's an important inquiry, and their role is important because it just underlines that the miscarriages of justice and the injustice continues, and the failings of the police continue. This wasn't just about huge flaws, deliberate, malevolent, and covered up in 25 years ago. It's going on now, and the inquiry is just another feature of that injustice. And so 5 points about the inquiry. First, it is supposedly a public inquiry, but it's been dragged into the public domain, kicking and screaming, the police, the inquiry, the Home Office, by campaigners who have gone through a lot of torment, difficulty, hard work, emotional upheaval to get there. It started with, I think, with women who are in relationships with what they thought were genuine lovers, and they turned out to be undercover police who had misled them and more. And they managed to bring this to the public consciousness and force the then Home Secretary, Theresa May, to set up this inquiry, combined with the fantastic efforts of the Lawrence family and those supporting them, including Suresh. So this wasn't something which the police and the authorities in the state wanted, quite the opposite. They wanted secrecy. And it's a major testament to everyone involved in triggering the inquiry and being involved in the inquiry that it's happening now. So that's secrecy. The second point is delay. As we know, Ricky was killed 25 years ago, and it was only in 2014 that the police confessed that they had been spying on the family justice campaign, and those around them. And as I think John said, they described it as collateral intrusion. The truth of it is that they were spying on every single aspect of this campaign. The trouble is that the secrecy continues, and although Sukhdev and I have seen various documents, that the documents are incomplete, we're constrained in what we can say about them because we have restriction orders, what are called restriction orders, preventing us from talking about them. And the reality is that we'll only be able to see, if it happens, what happened in the last 25 years in about 3 years' time, when there supposedly will be public scrutiny of the undercover policing of the real family in the campaign. So delay is another major feature of all of this. Resources. You've heard from Suresh that while, and I think it's a word, a phrase in of Sukhdev's in the book, while the family were, quote, begging for support in the early days and on in finding the culprits, those responsible for Ricky's murder, the police were, it seems, spending their time, energy, PR machine, resources, feet on the ground in surveilling the campaign, the family and those around them. So resources were misspent. And why? That's, for me, the big question. Why did it happen? I think it was a PR campaign. The family were a threat to the police. They were a threat to exposing failings by the police. and therefore they had to have an inside track of what the family and the campaign were doing, so they could preempt those actions and they could stifle the campaign. It was a PR exercise by the police, and worse than that, it was racist as well. And you don't need me to tell you that, and I'm sure Suresh and the family can tell you that. But it's no accident, and Suresh can say this as well because he's involved in so many of these campaigns. It's no access that I think almost all of the family campaigns, the justice campaigns in the Undercover Policing inquiry were non-white. It's just shocking, and you don't need me to tell you that. So the reasons why the Undercover Police Unit, the Special Demonstration Squad it was called, was set up was a PR exercise to stifle criticism, to cover up misconduct, and to extenuate, to continue the racist behaviour of the police, which is still continuing today, as those around this group know as well as I do. And the final point is what next. Last week, the senior civil servant in the Home Office, someone called Rycroft, gave evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee and floated the idea of closing down the public inquiry, closing down the investigation of police misconduct over 50, 60 years. And if that happens, it'll be as shocking as anything else that's happened in this saga, because it'll be the success of the police and of the state, of their marketing team, of their PR team, of the political right in trying to stifle criticism of cover-ups and misconduct and racism over 50 years. And it's a testament to people like Sukhdev and others, the campaign and the family around them, that through their resilience and efforts, despite all the emotional torment that they've been through, have pushed this inquiry up the agenda and will keep it going. And it's a real credit to Sukhdev and those around her that they will succeed, and that the Home Office and the Home Secretary and the civil servants and the police will not succeed in closing down this inquiry. So with that, hopefully we can hand over to the wonderful Sukhdev.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for that. Well, she has been silent on this platform so far this afternoon, but as the title of her book says, silence is not an option. She hasn't been silent for the last 25 years, and I'm certainly not going to be the person to silence her. So, Sukhdev, the floor is yours. Just make sure you keep it up.
What I was going to say, I've just put it on paper because my mind is swimming at the moment.
Just higher, if you can.
Okay. I would like to thank everyone here today and the organizers of Marxism Festival and Bookmarks for inviting me to launch my first book named Ricky Rio, Silence is Not an Option. Silence will never be an option for me because I have never been silent and I intend to carry on. The police can do whatever they want. We have been very vocal about Ricky's death in October 1997, about how the police have let us down over and over again, from the time they failed to investigate Ricky's disappearance, then his subsequent death, to the time, more recently, when we found out that the undercover police officers from the Special Demonstration Squad were spying on us. At the time when we were grieving for Ricky, we should have been left alone to grieve for Ricky in peace. The Justice for Ricky Real campaign was born not by choice, but out of desperation, because we realized early on, before even Ricky's body was found, that we were not going to get any justice through the police. Ricky died 25 years ago, and the campaign has been running for the same length of time. Imagine having to wait 25 years, a quarter of a century, for accountability from the authorities and the truth about your child's death, and still facing possibly another 25 years or more trying to get answers. I cannot bring my Ricky back, but it's all right, it's all right, it's okay. Yeah, that's fine. I cannot bring my son back, but I can lay open to others what we as a family have endured and continue to endure, so that lessons may be learned from our pain. I had been thinking of writing a book about my son's case for a long time, but all the obstacles or challenges were thrown in our way meant that we needed to deal with those first. Ill health also became an obstacle in this scheme where I almost died. What spurred me to write this now is more than one thing. Sorry. One day, I came across a book showing my photograph with Mike Mansfield QC. This was taken on the first day of Ricky's inquest. This led to more searches, only to discover that there are many other books, policies, theses, dissertations, and research which refer to Ricky's case. So I formed an occasion to write a book one day soon. But life was getting in the way as usual, and part of me was reluctant to confront and commit to paper the hell that we have been through for the last 2.5 decades. But then, what pushed me actually, putting paper to pen or fingers to keyboard, was a hilarious moment. My 2 granddaughters, 7-year-old twins, came and sat next to me at my house with the little notebooks and recently sharpened pencils, and told me that as a school project they had to write about a famous person. And that famous person in their eyes was their Uncle Ricky. They started asking questions about Ricky. Mind you, they were very persistent, just like their mother, my daughter, Ricky's sister. All my grandchildren who have never met Ricky want to know about him and ask a lot of questions about him, because he is still so much part of our family life. My eldest grandchild has now decided to pursue a different path due to Ricky's death. After they left, I started writing my first chapter. I have never written a book before. I didn't know what to start. I have written quite a lot of poems, but never a book, and did not know what to say, but the fingers kept on typing somehow, and it turned into a book. It was quite a traumatizing time for me. I have never forgotten this nightmare, but putting it on paper somehow made it more real. Brought back memories, more nightmares. And a few hospital admissions. I was sometimes shocked myself when I remembered what we have been forced to live through. My huge thanks to Com, look, put your hand up. That's the man. My publisher. My huge thanks to Com, my publisher, as he remained calm throughout the entire process. Even when I sent him several messages a day, he responded promptly to all my messages, which reduced my stress but doubled his. How he dealt with all this is a mystery to me. John, Mike, Suresh, Moan, all of them know what I'm like with my emails. These are the people always protecting, supporting, and standing with me for years. I know there is a brick wall behind me if I fall down. Another dear friend who had a prior engagement and was unable to be here today is Mike Mansfield, and he had already said his message. This book is Ricky's legacy, written with support from Balwant, my husband, who looked after me, making sure I was eating the food he had cooked for me, gave me cups of tea to ensure I had regular breaks. My children by supporting me, and my grandchildren, my God, endless questions, prompting me to carry on by asking endless questions about their Uncle Ricky Rio. People often talk about loss of child and how it affects them, but not many people talk about loss of a sibling. My children have also written a piece about Ricky's death and how it has changed them. We are not the same family we were 25 years ago. His death and the investigation, or rather the lack of investigation, has changed our family forever. We all get better at perfecting "I am okay," a mask which we wear to show the world we are all right. My children, their partners, my grandchildren, my husband, Ricky's father, our extended family, supporters and friends have all been a rock. And without them, I'm not sure I would have survived Ricky's death. I hope all of you can buy and read the book. I have now shared my Ricky with you all. Ricky belongs to all of you. I have put my heart, soul, weakness, and strength in the book. Please write reviews so that we can see what you think of it. Please keep on supporting us, and we need to know why and who killed Ricky. We all need peace, and that will only come once we have justice for Ricky. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sukhdev, not just for those incredibly powerful and poignant words today, but for writing this book and sharing your story and for sharing Ricky with us. And the greatest tribute that we can pay to you is obviously to buy the book and to go and tell your family's story and to continue the struggle that you have dedicated the last 25 years to and will continue to wage. On that note, we do have time for some questions and contributions. So,
yes, my name is Balwinder Rana, and we are really honored to have Sukhdev Reel here today, and her tremendous contribution in fighting against racism. Her courage and determination are unparalleled, and so I want to congratulate her. She got in touch with me about 3-4 months ago, and she said she wanted to publish her book. I put her in touch with the Bookmarks, and I'm very, very pleased that Bookmarks didn't take very long to publish her book. I'm definitely going to buy the book, and I will encourage everyone else to buy it as well. But I think it's not only police that they do not support families when their loved ones are killed by the racist fascists, like in the case of Ricky Reel and also in the Stephen Lawrence. But there are also many, many cases where the police themselves were in fact responsible for the deaths of black and Asian people, the people who were died in the police custody. I think there's at least 150 names, where people, as I said, that when they came into contact with the police, they died. In fact, most of them were actually murdered by the police. And also, the police have been responsible in supporting racist and fascists actively. Now, I'm a lot older than Suresh, and I myself have been active in the anti-racist struggle since the 60s. In fact, in 1969, I founded the very first Asian youth organization in this country called the Indian Youth Federation of Gravesend. And ever since then, I've been fighting against racism and fascism. I've been on hundreds of anti-fascist marches. Now, I can tell you, at every single march, when we marched against first the National Front, then the BNP, then the EDL, almost every time the police support the fascists and not us. In fact, they attacked us. People may remember Lewisham, where they attacked us, and also in Southall, 1979, when National Front wanted to hold their meeting, and the whole community came out in protest, supported by the Anti-Nazi League, and I was the chief steward for that protest. And the police there rather than stopping the National Front meeting, they attacked us. They brutalized the whole community, and they killed my friend and my comrade Blair Peach, who was a member of the Anti-Nazi League and a member of the Social Workers Party. And also, they have always supported the scabs. And whenever the workers go on strike, like in the Grunwick strike, then they later on the Great Miners' Strike, almost every time police attack the strikers while they supported the scabs. So I think it is basically police are not only racist, they're also anti-working class as well. And that is why I think what we really need is we basically, because the role of the police is to support the system. And when our system is in crisis, the police become more brutal. So real answer is for us to change the system so that we can get rid of police and get rid of system as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Balvinder. If you could just pass the mic forward. And you're passing the mic forward to another woman who is someone who I've had the privilege of sharing a platform with, and who is also another utterly indefatigable fighter for justice. She'll tell her own story. Janet Alder.
Sukhdev, I feel absolutely privileged to come here and watch you have your book launch, and it's really kind of encouraged me to get mine on the move. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, Ricky's death was very, very near to, do you know what was going on with Stephen Lawrence at the time? Do you believe that that was one of the reasons that you was shut down so quickly? One for the solicitor. They're going on about stopping people protesting. Yeah. Do you think that we should? Is that a law that should be listened to, or a law that should be ignored? Because especially with the Human Rights Act. And one for Suresh. Yeah. I've known you for a long time. Yeah. What kind of the rest of the system, the CPS, yeah, the IPCC. Can you explain to people just how connected those organisations are at preventing us getting justice? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janet.
Okay, so, it's an absolute honour to be here. My name is Manjit Sahota. I'm here with my colleague, Robert Punton, and we're Poets Against Racism. We are going to make a commitment today to share the poem I wrote for Ricky, Shine a Light on the Truth. Every festival poetry event we do through the summer. We will dedicate every performance to Ricky Reel's memory. We will dedicate every school workshop I do now in Nottingham University. We will work with you to launch the book in Birmingham, Leicester, Nottingham. We will work now to set those things up and get poets and writers to make sure to support it. I would love to get to Leicester Diwali and shine a light on the truth for Ricky and get that and light a light for Ricky, because this is not just a book launch. This is the launch of our history and proud fight back. Asian people have been seen as victims on TV, but we know we are fighters, we are warriors, and we come with our tradition. So give us the burden. We are ready. Solidarity to you, and we are one family.
It's not really a question, just more of a comment. I'm Ricky's sister, and I just want to say, if you've been moved by our fight for justice, or you've been moved by what you've heard my mum say, if you could... We launched a petition about a year ago to mark the 25th anniversary of Ricky's death. I was only 17 when he died. I'd ask everyone here, please, 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 to sign that petition. You can Google it, it's on change.org. And it's a petition to try and get the police to freshly investigate Ricky's death. We've waited 25 years and we're not about to sit back and wait another 25 years. So please, put it on your social media, speak to your friends, speak to your family, speak to your communities, and please get his story out there and get people signing that petition, because we won't be able to put the pressure on the police that we need to put unless they know that people are listening and people are watching them. That's the only way to get them to do anything. And the second thing I'd ask you all to do is to contact your local MP. get in touch with the local MP and get them to write to the Home Secretary, get them to write to Sadiq Khan. Tell them that you've heard about Ricky's story, Ricky's family, and you are not going away, and you want them to help us lobby for a fresh investigation, not just to get justice for Ricky, but all the families that have contacted us since he died to tell us 25 years on that this is still happening to them, and that's not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable 25 years ago, and it's not acceptable today. So please contact your MPs and let us know that you've done it so that we can follow up through our MP, John McDonnell. Thank you very much.
Hi, I just wanted to say on behalf of Bookmarks that we're incredibly proud and deeply humbled to publish this book. I was going to say that usually when you're editing a book, you'd be going through the book and trying to correct it and sort of maybe change phrases here and there. And so with Sukhdev's book, I just didn't want to touch anything about it at all because it's such a deeply personal and moving account, and it just has her voice and it's from her heart. And you get off the phone to Sukhdev, and the voice that you heard her speaking in is the same voice that's in the pages, and it really comes from somewhere very deep. There's an incredible celebration of Ricky's life, great tributes and appreciation of all the people who supported the campaign. The full account of how painful it was finding out what the police were up to and how badly they treated the family and all those sorts of things. So it's a very, very personal book. But Sukhdev always makes the point, as others have made it today, that it's not just a personal story. It's the implications of it are so much wider. It's about the sort of society that we live in. It's about the nature of the state and so on. And I thought it was very, in the middle of when we were just starting to prepare the book, I went back to, I grew up in Derry in the north of Ireland, and I went back to Derry for the 50th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday massacre. The families there still campaigning for justice after 50 years, despite 12 years of an inquiry and millions of pounds, and I'm facing a government now that is far from actually changing its ways, is actually now fighting a rearguard action against all the revelations that are coming out about all the massacres, the death squads, the assassinations that were carried out by the same British state, remember, in the north of Ireland. That's the same government and state that we have here, but far from learning any lessons from it or changing anything, they're determined to try and stop justice. Boris Johnson's trying to introduce a bill to give a complete blanket amnesty to every British soldier who ever served in the north of Ireland or elsewhere. And so that's what we're up against. But when I mentioned this to Sukhdev, she said, of course, I've been in touch with the Bloody Sunday families. I've been over to Derry. I know Sheila Coleman, who goes there every year as well, fighting for justice for the Hillsborough families. And that network of people that you meet when in these campaigns, like Sukhdev, they are motivated with a tremendous, inspiring humanity and love for people, I think. It's something that it's incredible, in spite of all these things, how people can take comfort for that in spite of the grave injustice that they face and continue to. And I just wanted to read you a little bit from the introduction to the book that Sukhdev read when she was explaining why she was writing the book, which I think is a real tribute to her. And she said, I continue to fight not to exact revenge or retribution. It is for a reason far more humane than this. I want to stop families being ripped apart the way ours has, and to stop the senseless hatred which has become a norm in our society. I do not bear a grudge against anyone because Ricky's love will not permit me to do so. He led a peaceful and happy life, and I simply want to know how and why my son died. My mother in pain, Sukhdev Reel. And congratulations, Sukhdev. It's been a real privilege from start to finish to be working with you on the book, and yes, it's wonderful, and please, everybody get a copy of it and read it. Thanks.
This book only came because of your dedication, your words. When I asked you if you would print the book, you didn't even see the manuscript. You said to me, Sukhdev, I will print your book. I will print it with love and dedication it deserves. So these are the words that stay with me. Every time I look at the book, I remember those words. Thank you for being such a good friend. Thank you.
Just one last contribution and then I'll come back to the panel.
This is a tribute to Ricky. This is a poem by Ram Prasad Bismil, which was written to wake the general public to fight for the rights, and because silent is not an option. It's in Urdu, you all might know. सरफरोशी की तमन्ना अब हमारे दिल में है, देखना है जोर कितना बाजुए कातिल में है, which translates to the desire for revolution is in our hearts. Let us see how much strength is there in the arms of our executioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I mean, I really do wish that we could go on all afternoon, but obviously we can't. I'm going to let the panel have the final words, but let me just say this, and I'm sure, Suresh, you can confirm this, that with the Lawrence campaign, obviously one of the critically important moments, and you talked about this, was when Nelson Mandela came over and endorsed the family campaign and gave it an international recognition and platform. One of the other things I think both Neville and Doreen said is that what was critically important was the financial backing that they received from trade unionists and, you know, the underwriting of their campaign, because these campaigns go on for years and years and years, and as you've heard, decades, and they're not funded by big business, corporations and so on. They're funded by the support of ordinary people. And that was a message that working people understood and took, which is why they went round their local communities with petitions and buckets and to their trade union branches and passed resolutions and to the TUC to get their union federations to support the Lawrence campaign and to financially underwrite it. And, you know, this struggle, as you've heard this afternoon, goes on. So that's something very, very concrete, practical and material that people can do, as well as, you know, buying copies of the book yourself. Take it back to your workplaces, your colleges, your local communities. Get others to buy the book and get them also to commit to the practical support that can ensure that the Justice for Ricky Real and other campaigns, like Janet Alder's campaign, can continue. On that note, let me one by one go along the panel. Mike, do you want to say a few words first?
Yeah, I think just not responding to Janet's question about whether to encourage people to break the law, because this is being filmed and broadcast. What I would say, though, is this government has a track record of passing laws but not obeying them. The other thing I'd say is that it's a testament to campaigns and campaigners that the government give attention to them by giving the medal of criminalising protest, because it just shows how effective protest is. And frankly, protesters and campaigners like Sukhdev and many, many others are bigger and better than this government and its anti-protest laws. And just a final point from me, and just picking up what Tish says, we must look to the future as well. And the future must be a proper, independent, resourced investigation, reinvestigation, if you can call it that, of Ricky's murder. That's what the future should look like. Otherwise, we're facing a really bleak future if the government and the police won't do that.
Yeah, specifically to what you raised, Brian, and then I'll address what Janet asked. You know, the Lawrence campaign is forgotten. There isn't a book on it. There is a book by Mrs. Doreen Lawrence called Arise, but it's not a book about the campaign or the struggle for justice. It's a personal testimony of bigger things that happen after the public inquiry is granted and she goes into the House of Lords. There isn't a single written composition of a campaign which was international in character, ferocious and audacious from the time Stephen was killed by racists on 22nd of April to the launch and publication of the public inquiry in February 99. And what people have forgotten is the daily marches, the protests, the trade union support, money coming in, not from Labour Party, central leaderships or political parties, but working class communities, black, white, brown. That's actually where the money came from. I was the coordinator of the campaign I took over from Mark Wadsworth just after Nelson Mandela visited the family in May. It's actually Mark Wadsworth who organized the visit for Nelson Mandela. And it's actually, it's interesting, when the Lawrences met Nelson Mandela at the Piccadilly Hotel, we didn't ask him whether he should make a statement. He himself offered to make that statement because he was taken aback, not just by the Lawrence story, but the sheer number of racial violence taking place. He was talking about the PNP headquarters in Welling, the marches that were taking place, the killing of Rohit Dougal in Greenwich, the killing of Gurdeep Banger, Roland Adams, Greenwich or Eltham being known as the racist murder capital of Britain. That's actually the activism that was taking place. And in Southall, where I come from, Chaggar had been killed, Kuldeep Singh Sekhar had been killed. We can keep on talking about story after story and story. So it's actually Mandela himself who said, do you mind if I make a statement outside the hotel? We didn't even have to ask him. There's nothing written about it. And that campaign is important for two reasons. And it's not to belittle the campaign about Sukhdev. That's why I didn't want to talk about the Lawrence campaigns. They're not comparable. They are equally important. They are equally worthwhile, and they are equally should be recognized on a national and international stage, just like the campaign that Janet has run on her brother Christopher Alder. No single campaign has a monopoly to say, this is the most important campaign. Unfortunately, politicians take this, not learn the lessons, use this name, and carry forward. That's what happens. So the real story about trade union support, right at the beginning, is forgotten, and it's not written about. And Sukhdev knows, and the family knows, we were supported in Sukhdev's case in the campaign by trade union, working class communities. And it's true for the case that I met Mike on, which was Michael Manson, killed in North Circular, set on fire, and the police said it was an accident. And then a year later, the inquest found it was unlawful killing, and they went and arrested 3 people for murder in Greece. I went to the trial from an accidental death because, Michael Manson, a musician, was set on fire. He had 3rd-degree burns on his body. He couldn't speak. They assumed he was mentally ill and said he put fire on himself. It's shocking. And it's actually Cressida Dick I met at the inquest who wanted to do something about it. But she actually never raised a hand to do something about it. She became a police commissioner afterwards. I'm also involved in other cases where she lets people down. But I think in terms of trade union support in working class communities, no campaign, whether it's Michael Manson's, Sukhdev Reel, Stephen Lawrence would survive without that independent support from trade unions. And we have to keep on saying that publicly because it doesn't get recognized in the main media. The trade unions are forgotten when we discuss these campaigns. And in fact, the trade union movement and the campaign supporters within the core of the Stephen Lawrence campaign who push for finances and link up with other network of socialist and trade union organizations, independent organizations, etc. So very, very important. In terms of Janet's question, very specifically, I suppose Janet is asking me because I know she's writing a book which will be very powerful. I think you're writing a book, Janet. You've been saying to me you're writing a book. I hope you're not, because your brother's story is one of the most devastating stories I've ever come across. I'm not going to talk about it. You need to do it yourself. But in the Lawrence inquiry, and I'll use that inquiry to show the connection between the police and the CPS and the criminal justice agencies like the IOPC, etc. As you know, in the Lawrence inquiry, the recommendations made significant sea changes in how the police complaint should be looked at. Prior to that, it was the Police Complaints Authority. 99% of the complaints were dealt by police themselves. There's no independent route to get any scrutiny. So they changed it to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. It is now IOPC, so it's been changed again. Part of the system where I don't believe there is sufficient independent scrutiny by any of these regulatory bodies to look at independent complaints. 99% of complaints are still dealt by ex-police officers. In very rare cases where Article 2 is where deaths by state agents, Article 2, right of life, you get some kind of independent commission. But I don't think there's more than 1% of cases where there is any action against police officers. Over the last, since 1993, I think there's been 3,184 deaths in custody. We've only had one conviction, and that's of a footballer on taser. One bloody conviction since 1933. So you can tell how terrible the whole state of affairs is. I know the politicians make a big deal about Stammer being a Crown prosecutor and DPP, etc. But the struggle against racism in relation to the police has also been a struggle against the Crown Prosecution Service in the disproportionate numbers of black people who are charged, arrested, and convicted, and then sent to centers and then die in custody. You can show it, you can see it right throughout. And there is no real difference between the Crown Prosecution Service, which plays the role of collating the evidence, preserving the evidence, what the police give, and then charging the stuff. For activists and for communities, there hasn't been that qualitative difference where there's that independent scrutiny. I think there is I think if you want to develop a reformist agenda of seeing how things can be petered out, possibly you can say things can be tinkered with. But I think we need to look at groundbreaking root and branches, systemic changes if you're going to get any form of justice. And we need to have that discussion. And I don't think we should say that families don't want to discuss that because they're only talking about their own cases. Every family wants to discuss how to get justice. And we have to make the distinction between law enforcement agencies and justice. And it's actually something that Tony Benn said at one of this Marxism stuff I attended, where he said there's a qualitative difference between law and order and justice. I didn't think it like that. I knew that to be true. But law and order is not about giving justice. It's about the state responding to certain legal challenges that it has and how the state sees it should be done. Justice, in the sense where it derives from in terms of freedom and liberty as an issue where people are justly treated even if something goes wrong, has never been a domain or a significant factor in this society. So people think I can get justice by getting a conviction. Of course, we want a conviction in Ricky's case, but we don't want somebody wrongly convicted, and it isn't going to bring Ricky back, even if he's convicted. And therefore, the quote that Corbyn talked about not having any revengeful thoughts, is a distinction between law enforcement and justice. That is the road of justice that we want. I used to go to Derry every year because of what had happened in Derry. And it's striking when oppressed communities, discriminated communities, racialized communities like Black, Asian, suffer that indignity. I'm going to finish now. There is no issue about revenge from us. We don't want revenge. We simply want the state to be held to account. And if it's not going to be held to account, we want a powerful movement which shifts that opinion. That's actually what justice is about. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Suresh. Just quickly to say that Janet Alder will be speaking at the final rally, so please do get along to that at 5:30, I think it is. But the final word, of course, must go to you, Sukhdev.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming and supporting us, and please continue to support us. We really need your support. I just want to say justice done to my son. When I went to see him after he was found, I put my hand on his forehead and I said to him, whatever I have to do, I will do. Whatever bridges I have to cross, I will do it. but I will try and get you justice. It doesn't matter because I died also with Ricky on that day. I put myself, my happiness, my life in his coffin, and I carried his coffin on my shoulders with my husband. So the only thing that's left in my life now is to get justice, and I can't do it alone. I need people like you to come and support me and get justice. It's so easy to just forget about it, sit in a corner and grieve because I'm not gonna get Ricky back. But I am standing and fighting simply because I know how much it hurts, and I do not want another parent going through the same pain and grief. If I can prevent one death, that means I have got justice for Ricky. So please continue to support us. Thank you.